Hello and welcome to the CivilTalk Podcast. I'm your host, Tapasio Althouse. If you're new to the show, this is where we explore civility and social emotional learning with esteemed guests, expert insights, and practical advice to help people navigate the world. Today on the CivilTalk Podcast, I'm joined by Sabina Nawaz, a leadership coach, keynote speaker, and former Microsoft executive who has spent over 2 decades helping leaders understand how power, pressure, and blind spots shape the way we show up at work. Sabina's work focuses on a simple question: how does leadership pressure change our behavior? And what does it cost our relationships, teams, and culture when we're unaware of it? Drawing from her experience coaching C-suite executives and her research on influence and authority, she helps leaders build self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and the kind of presence that creates trust rather than fear. Her book, You're the Boss, offers an evidence-based framework for managing pressure and power with clarity, self-awareness, and emotional intelligence. And we are so excited to have Sabina on the show. Welcome, Sabina Nawaz.
Wow, thank you so much, Tapasio, for that glowing introduction. I'm excited to be leaning into this Civil Talk dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was listening to another podcast that you were on the other day, and you were saying that you began your career in computer science and engineering at Microsoft, working on the technical side. And later you made a shift into HR and leadership development, which isn't a common path. I feel like you need 2 very different brains for that. What did you start noticing in engineering environments that pulled you towards the human side of leadership?
What a great question. It is two different sides of the brain, and yet they're very interconnected. What pulled me into this work was, well, I had my personal story of realizing that it was no longer a matter of if, but when I would become a corporate vice president, and recognizing if I already know the formula to that, why spend the next few years chasing it? And so going at, well, what are some of my strengths? And people had said I was good with people. And that's one of the reasons I moved to this kind of work. But from an engineering culture standpoint, like with actually any organization, we promote people into management roles without giving them any management training or guidance or support. Now, fortunately, I worked for a company that was willing to spend time, money, and resources on helping managers. And I thought, gosh, I wish I had had more of that back in the early days. And the pieces of training that I did have had been transformational for me. They've been so helpful. So I thought, let me give back and let me contribute. Little did I know that it was not as much about giving back as what I learned and how much it enriched my own life by doing this work.
Yeah, that's amazing. So when did you first notice the gap between, a lot of your work revolves around leaders and people who are kind of already successful and how they show up in the workforce. So when did you first notice the gap between how leaders intend to lead and how they're actually experienced by others?
Well, it's a very deeply personal story. I noticed it in myself at first. I had gotten a lot of feedback, Tapasya, as I mentioned, that, oh, you're one of the best managers I've had. And then everything changed when I went on parental leave and came back. So the first day after parental leave, I'm putting on lipstick for the very first time in 5 months. And my assistant, Lori, calls me kind of frantic. Where are you? Steve expects you in 30 minutes. And Lori starts reading me the memo I'm discussing with Steve Ballmer, the CEO of Microsoft, while I hit warp speed on the freeway to get there on time. And that, Tapasio, set the pace and tone for my return to work. Inbox overflowing, calendar packed, infant at home. So no sleep, no peace, no patience. And I morphed overnight from caring and nurturing to now snippy and short. Still 5'3" short, but now also short-tempered. Rushing to meet deadlines, I told myself, I don't have time to provide detailed explanations, let alone repeat them. I started micromanaging. When people would come to my office, I would turn my shoulder over the keyboard with all 10 fingers on, indicating I'm really busy. I don't have time for you. Spit it out, move on.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the thing. This is how the gap happened. Is I thought I was killing it. I was being efficient. Look at all this stuff I'm doing as a new mom, coming back to work and working with senior executives here.
Yeah.
Until my colleague Joe stops by. And here I am again, 10 fingers on the keyboard. Yes, Joe. And then Joe says, do you know that Zach is crying in his office because of what you said at that meeting?
Oh no.
Yeah.
Zach.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So my whole body just goes hot with shame. And as I go to apologize to Zach, I'm realizing, wow. First wondering, how did I get here? From being caring and compassionate to this person that people don't like, that people are afraid of. And how do I have no idea that this is what's happening? And I talked to Zach, and as his eyes brim with tears, I realized this is what I want. I want to treat people with humanity. So we create this gap happens across power because power creates this chasm. It's like a broken volume knob. Everything people are going to say upward is going to be muted. So you're often the last person to find out, which is why in my book, I address these different power gaps that can open up as fissures and that become huge yawning chasms and impact productivity, foster misunderstanding if you don't pay attention to them.
It's a beautiful story. I really appreciate you sharing that and also being vulnerable about that. I think it takes a lot of bravery to take accountability for making someone cry in the workforce, but with that being said, I don't think every leader has that capacity to be like, I'm going to fix what I broke, And so how do you deal with that? How do you deal with leaders who hear about someone like Zach crying and is like, HR will deal with it, or you deal with it, How do you deal with individuals like that?
Yeah. The first thing is data, is to give them the data of it's not Zach. Zach is not the problem.
Right.
If you think that, first of all. Second of all, maybe you don't care as much about Zach, but you care about your business results.
Right.
And when employees are treated poorly, what do? They get revenge. They play video games.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what, Tapasio, there's research that shows that employees will even deliberately make mistakes in their work when their boss treats them poorly. I mean, think about that. They're willing to sabotage themselves just to get back at the boss.
Yeah.
So when you understand the consequences of your behavior, when you understand that your behavior is not always like that, let's not label you as good or bad, but that you're acting that way under pressure, then it makes for a much more compelling case. When I work with people one-on-one, when I coach them, there was one person who told me, you know what, as I get this feedback, I'm realizing management is not the right career for me. And they've gone on to a very, very different career. But just about everybody else, with very few exceptions on one hand, they do stick it through. And they realize, because they realize this gap, and they realize that, look, most people don't wake up in the morning and go, let me make life miserable for my people.
Right.
So they realize there's this big mismatch between their intention and the impact it's having.
Right. Exactly. I was just thinking of that, the intention versus impact.
Yes.
How do you step into that space where you're teaching sort of, not to sound judgmental, but teaching grown-ups about the difference between intention versus impact? Because it seems like something that you might learn very early on in life.
Yeah.
And when you have to, it's wild to me sometimes how, adults need to be reminded of that.
Yeah.
So how do you, I guess, refresh memories in a way that's non-judgmental and that's, like, hey, why don't we keep this what tools do you give leaders to make sure they keep that idea at the forefront of their
Well, Tapasio, here's the truth. The more senior you get, the more accomplished you get, the less aware you are of the gap between your intention and the impact it's having, because fewer people are going to tell you.
Yeah.
So what I ask them to do is not trust themselves solely, but get feedback. Now, that's easier said than done. They will tell me, but Sabina, I asked for feedback and everybody tells me I'm doing great. And then when you go talk to them, they're telling you all these things that are not going so well. So the quality of the feedback you receive is directly proportional to the quality of questions you ask to solicit that feedback. Most people will say, hey, will you give me feedback? I'm really open to it. And people go, yes, boss. And then they never do. Because who in their right mind is going to give feedback to the boss, especially if the boss ends up being scary to them?
Mm-hmm.
People are crying in their offices or in the bathrooms because of them. So you also cannot go, hey, how did I do in that meeting?
Right.
Because of course, the answer is going to be, you did great, boss. Meanwhile, they've started a secret group chat about how terrible you did.
Right.
So there are 3 techniques to avoid those pitfalls in asking for feedback and to ask for concrete feedback. First, make it specific. What's one thing I did well? What's one thing if I did more of less of would make me do even better? So it's very specific. It's much harder to bypass that question. Second, make it small. It's not 5 things. It's one thing and one thing. And the third is make it about a third person. It might be too scary, even with a specific and small question, for a direct report to give you that direct feedback if they're not in the habit of doing that. And if you're not in the habit of receiving that, let's be honest about that too. So what if you said, if my biggest fan was in the room, what's one thing they would say I did well? And if my biggest critic were in the room, what's one thing they would say that I needed to improve on? So now this person doesn't have to put themselves in real or perceived harm's way, but still give you quality feedback.
Yeah. I think another aspect, as you're talking about that, I'm thinking about that and doing that with my superiors or whatever, but it also kind of just reminds me of like romantic relationships too, and feedback and giving. And also it depends on the other person being a genuine listener.
Yes.
I think that's a huge thing that leaders too need to focus on. And I'd love your thoughts on that, is being a very generous listener. And I think that is a skill set that leaders can really work on, is being generous and how you listen, because there are some things that I think people might feel comfortable saying to a friend or maybe to a fellow employee that's more direct. And I think leaders really respect directness. And if they respect directness when it comes to work, they should respect directness that comes to how they're also doing the job too.
Absolutely. And Tapasya, I love your term generous and generosity. So what does that mean? To me, that means, and what I encourage people to be radically present. Mm-hmm. So turn off the second monitor, put your device out of arm's reach, and just focus on this person in this moment. Easier said than done. Try it in small micro habits, small increments before you're able to do it at all times. Yeah. But generosity also means sometimes saying a lot less. So when you receive feedback, the minimum bar is simply go, thank you. If you cannot go further than that, if you have a desire, an itch to justify, explain, defend, just say thank you. Mm-hmm. Now, beyond that, one of the things I hear often is not that this person is not open to feedback. They're very open to feedback. They even listen generously, but then they don't do anything about it. Now, there are 2 reasons people will say they don't do anything about it. Actually, 3 reasons. 1, you've done it, but it's not visible to them.
Right.
2, you've done it, but they don't like what action you've taken. So they don't credit you with it. In fact, they discredit you with it. And 3, you haven't connected the action with the specific feedback they have provided. Mm-hmm. So saying, thank you so much for giving me feedback on my level of impatience and how I've been emailing you 3 times before the deadline that you have committed to. I want you to know that over the last month, I have consciously not done that, not just with you, but with the rest of the team. I hope to continue to do it, but I want you to know how much of an impact that had on me. Because it's hard. Changing perception is hard. You can work super hard and address something, but people may not notice it unless you connect the dots explicitly for them.
Yeah, I think that can be tough when you're already grappling with the intensity of what's going on.
Yes.
And also, as you're talking about this, I'm thinking about how people tend to change things after consequence. And that's also kind of, what's your experience with that, where leaders, what are the statistics and numbers for that, where you see leaders only changing after consequence strikes and not preemptively?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's human nature to prioritize the things that are burning, that are on fire. And guess what? The systems around us reward that as well. Whoever said, oh yeah, I'm a great fire preventer in their performance review and got promoted because of that. They got promoted because they were a great firefighter. We get promoted, rewarded, noticed, spotlighted when we do heroics. So absolutely, when things are hot, there's more likely to be action. With the yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting distinction, the way you worded that. I'm not a fire preventer, I put out fires. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really interesting. Like, I kind of strive, coming away from this conversation, I think that a big thing that I'm going to take away from this is I want to be someone who prevents forest fires, not someone who knows how to put them out.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe a little bit of both,
Yes.
Because fires are bound to happen.
Well, and you work in branding, and you know that part of that then is conveying the impact of that. So instead of saying, oh, people are only going to reward those firefighters, you need to shift the narrative in a way that you show the value of what you have done. How has it saved time, money, resources, increased customer satisfaction because of what you've done?
Yeah. So I'd like to talk a little bit about your book, You're the Boss, which centers around, the hazard, what we're talking about right now, the hazards of pressure and power and leadership roles. Can you talk to us a little bit about the book and what inspired it and your journey in creating it?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are 3 key tenets in the book, in You're the Boss. So it's not power that corrupts, it's pressure. Power then isolates us to the impact of that, and getting promoted might be the most dangerous time in your career. What inspired me to write this book? First, it's that story that I shared with you, Tapasio, realizing that you can go from the best boss ever to the worst boss from hell if you are not mindful of how pressure is running the show instead of you. So I knew that was the case for me. Then also another really interesting thing happened. As I coach CEOs, I do this process called a 360 interview process, where I interview about a dozen people that work with and for that CEO. And I heard all these things. So when I'm working with the CEO, I'm thinking, oh, this person's great. They've got it together. Here are some things that they're doing really well. And I'm really relating to them. They seem like wonderful human beings to me. But that's not what some of the 360 feedback shows. Oh, they're miserable. They get mad at us. Their spit is flying out of their mouth when they're angry. All this stuff that you really think, wow, are they talking about the same person? And that got me very curious about how is the same person showing up so differently based on the context? And, oh, these are the kinds of pressures that they're under that lead to those bad boss behaviors that I'm not seeing, but others are seeing. So I ended up collecting 12,000 pages of interview data, verbatim data of what people thought of their bosses, and analyzed that. And that led me to the power gaps and the pressure pitfalls that we talk about in the book. And how do you reduce those power gaps? How do you mitigate those pressure pitfalls? It was a long journey. There was also a lot of personal struggle before I finally put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard. Things like, I was scared. I was like, what if I tell everyone I'm writing a book and then I fail? What if it goes out into the open and then people attack me for my ideas? A lot of fears, doubts, and uncertainties that I had to overcome before I could actually get on with the task.
Well, I'm glad you overcame them because we're all benefiting from
Thank you, Tapasya.
Appreciate that. So can you walk us through one practical tool from the book that leaders can apply today to improve how they're experienced?
Absolutely. I'm a minimalist, so my tools are all about doing less, saying less. One of those is about exercising your shut up muscle. So often what happens is the more power we have, the more we come in and we start the meeting, we start talking, and then pretty soon we're the only ones talking. Or nobody is disagreeing with our ideas, even when they are speaking, they're just agreeing and embellishing and building on that idea. And that loses the benefit of multiple perspectives. And what if my idea is incomplete or incorrect? Nobody's going to tell me that until it goes out into the market. So instead of being the first to speak when you're ideating, when you're discussing things, what if you were the third or the fourth to speak? That's step one of exercising your shut up muscle. And another step in the shut up muscle, because this is immediately followed by a objection from people, a concern. But Sabina, what if I forget all those ideas that are buzzing around in my head? And I tell them, take margin notes. So in the main body, take your regular notes, and then in the margin, write down all your ideas. So when it's your turn to speak eventually, you may have had 5 ideas in your margin notes. Let's say 3 of those somebody else surfaced. Fantastic. The 2 that you're going to bring up are truly unique. So you've truly added value versus stolen the microphone from someone else. Now you and them can leave the meeting feeling smart, feeling like they've contributed. How much more motivated are they going to be when they believe it's their idea and that they contributed?
Yeah, I love that. It sort of eliminates also a hierarchy.
Yes.
I think people get really afraid when there is a undisclosed hierarchy happening.
Absolutely.
I saw this picture the other day. It kind of this image flashed into my head, and it was like the American school system classrooms where the desks are in rows, and then it cut to a picture of Swedish classrooms, and the desks are in circles. It's one big circle.
Wow.
And I really liked that because it was just so opposite of hierarchy.
Yes.
And I think about that sort of in meetings. If it's a digital meeting or a remote meeting or whatever, imagine you're in a circle. And that's really important, I think, for leaders to maybe have in their heads too. Imagery helps as well. Because I think it's really hard for leaders, especially if you're at the top, to do it in a logical way, but maybe doing it in an imagery sort of way, and having that tool can help as well.
Yeah, because a circle is so egalitarian. I love that. I didn't know that was how the Swedish school system was organized physically. The other thing is, yes, and it's hard for them to not participate or do this, but it's also actually easy for other people. It lets everyone else off the hook. Sometimes it's convenient. They're like, I don't have to stick my neck out. I don't have to work so hard. They're going to pedal fast and come up with all the ideas or talking points. So it serves both sides, and you've got to be mindful of that.
Yeah, it really, I think power, you mentioned in your book that power really creates blind spots that leaders can't really see on their own. And I think you might have mentioned too, correct me if I'm wrong, that self-reflection alone just isn't enough.
Exactly.
And feedback plus self-reflection plus time, and I think is a great way to start. And maybe, I don't know, killing your ego too.
Yeah, well, no, it is. And at the very end of the book is this segment called 360 Yourself, which is a list of 42 questions. It takes about 15 minutes to complete, which shows you which power gaps and which pressure pitfalls you are most likely to fall into. Right. So you don't even have to read the whole book. You can just go to that particular chapter. Every chapter has some tools and some micro habits that you can practice as a result.
That's interesting. I love that. What are the biggest power pitfalls that you see leaders falling into? Just curious.
Well, one of them is the singular story, which is when I come in a position of authority and I say something, and I'm not there because I've been wrong a lot or I've failed a lot, right? I've had lots of successes. I have a long track record. So my story then becomes the story, both because of my experience and because of what power does in muting the room. And a so that's a huge power gap, and a way to offset that is to practice what I call multiple meanings. This is a game I created when my sons were young. We would notice something going on as I was taking them to school, and we would take turns making multiple meanings.
Mm-hmm.
So, oh, this guy's walking by with a leather vest and tattooed arms, and one of us could say he's advertising his tattoo parlor, and someone else might say he's a lawyer and he's this is his day off and he can show off his tattoos, and someone else might say the tattoos are fresh so he needs something sleeveless, and so on and so forth. And that ended up building a lot of muscle strength in them, so when there was conflict,
Mm-hmm.
you could say, whoa, wait a minute, yes, your brother's not necessarily a rat, maybe he is, but what else could be going on? And suddenly, like, multiple meanings showed up.
Wow.
It's no different at the executive level to not just have your singular story, but even sometimes it might require you anointing roles to people. You be the voice of the competitor. You be the voice of the customer. You be the voice of the contrarian. What are some ways in which you would frame what we have just talked about? That's an incredibly helpful way to offset that power gap.
I love that so much, multiple meanings, because it really exercises your curiosity. And I love that imagery of a, big tattooed man walking down the street, attaching multiple meanings to what he's doing.
Yes.
It could also be they're not even real tattoos, they're fake tattoos, and he's
exactly
an actor, and
yes.
he's actually a priest or something, and you just like
right
don't know.
Yeah.
And it really is such a good exercise in extinguishing judgment,
completely.
And I think that's such an important exercise and ability to have too. And I was thinking about this the other day, when someone is triggered by you who doesn't know you, and it's not, and I say this a lot on the podcast, but it's so much less about you and more about them and what they're going through. And your strategy of multiple meanings is such a great tool to have, not only in the workplace, but that's something I love, how certain tools can also be exercised outside workplace, because you spend so much time outside of your job too, so I think a lot of the concepts in your book can really cross over into your actual day-to-day life outside of work, which is really important. And
absolutely,
getting curious about why people are acting a certain way, and sort of having a sort of love affair with psychology too, and just asking more whys.
Yes. I was just going to say that too, that multiple meanings has actually improved the quality of my marriage, because I'm not just going and saying, how come you didn't roll the trash bin up and you were late, and instead going, oh, maybe it's the day after Thanksgiving and they don't take out the trash this day, or maybe something else, right? So multiple meanings has helped me in multiple ways in just about every aspect of my life.
Yeah, I love that. How does I think it's important also to distinguish too when multiple meanings isn't working, I guess. And because I think multiple meanings, I'm going to be using this in my life now too.
Awesome.
When do you push multiple meanings aside and be like, okay, this is a pattern, and this is not, I've noticed that this person is doing this over and over and over again. And cutting into, I know that my husband or whatever wife is not late because of traffic this one time. This is a habitual pattern.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly. So, and applying that to your boss or whatever, it's a habitual pattern that she or he is snarky. It's not a bad day. He or she is not hungry. So what strategy can you use other than giving feedback or
Yeah.
quitting
Yeah.
that can ameliorate the situation?
Yeah. Yeah. You bring up such a wise point, Tapasio, which is you could also kind of go into analysis paralysis if you do multiple meetings all the time, every day,
Mhm.
and then you're not standing up for yourself.
Yeah.
You're not setting healthy boundaries. So it could be for a number of reasons someone is doing something, but if the behavior is inappropriate, then speaking about the impact of that on you is really important. You could do that in a multiple meanings way by saying, gosh, I imagine that a lot of things were going on when you walked into that meeting. And if there's anything I can do to support you on those things, let me know. And when I noticed that you interrupted me 5 times in a 25-minute session, when you do that, it shuts me down. I'm not able to provide the data that you're looking for because I lose my train of thought. Right. So now I'm clearly explaining the data, the facts versus the meanings in that particular case. So you switch from interpretations to observable data.
I like that observable data. There's not, unless this person is a wild manipulator, there's a lot that can be done with just straight up facts.
Exactly.
And breaking down what those facts are and the impact that they've had. What strategy from your book, tend to feel sort of easiest for leaders conceptually, but hardest for them to actually implement?
Great question. I was going to go with what feels easiest and is easiest, but I'll go into the hard to implement. Awesome question. It's the practice of blank space. So if to reduce a power gap, you say nothing, to reduce a pressure pitfall, you do nothing. And this is we forget that we're human beings, not human doings. And when we're under pressure, our tendency often is to do more. Write more sticky notes, wake up at 3 a.m., sacrifice gym time, sacrifice time with our family, and do, go, go, go. And that makes it even more frantic. And we get this never ending hamster wheel, ever expanding hamster wheel. Instead, blank space is stopping, pausing, and doing nothing. So you unplug, you go away from your office, preferably from your home as well. You're not reading, you're certainly not online, and you're not in conversation with anyone. Why? 2 benefits. First of all, research shows that our best insights come when we allow our brains to be quiet, in the shower, on our commute, during exercise. So this allows you to go, oh, this thing that I'm so stressed about, that's causing me so much pressure, and I'm thinking I don't know what to do and I'm stuck. Suddenly, bing, 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 the answer arrives in my brain once I've shut down all that noise. The second benefit is it puts things in perspective. Instead of all those sticky notes, you suddenly realize that's not that important. What's really important is this bigger picture. So blank space is a fantastic practice when done well. Ideal blank space is 2 hours a week, every week. And there are clients of mine who do that religiously. It's been a game changer for them. Some have changed careers. Some have transformed their business. Others have transformed their lives. Lots of fantastic benefits. It is really hard to do. And the hardest part is not the logistical part. You can come up with a bunch of hacks where you ring fence that time and you save it as sacred. It's psychological. It's very difficult for people to sit around doing nothing. We're kind of wired to always take action. It hits this dopamine cycle of ours, and it's addictive.
Yeah.
So forcing ourselves to do nothing is very, very hard. This leads me to the thing that's easiest to do, which is micro habits. Really small, do it every day, succeed at it because it's so small, so it's ridiculously small, so you will keep doing it. And so with blank space, don't start with 2 hours if that's going to be really hard for you. Start with 30 seconds. 30 seconds a day. Step away, turn your back to everything, and spend 30 seconds doing nothing. And if you're successful in that for 2 weeks at a stretch, then you add another 15 seconds to it. That small, that tiny. And if you aren't doing 30 seconds, reduce it even further. Make it 10 seconds. So keep reducing it till you actually do it. Mm-hmm. And then don't increase it for a long time.
I love that. As you're talking, I'm thinking about, why do people have such a difficult time with not doing anything? Like, something so seemingly simple is very hard. And I actually, this morning, did this morning exactly what you're talking about, which I don't do very frequently. And it was an odd morning in that sense. And as you're speaking, I'm like, why don't I do that? Why don't I have that blank space time? And I think a lot of the times it's because you don't feel safe in yourself. You don't feel safe in your body. You don't feel safe with your mind. You don't feel safe with your feelings. And I think a great strategy for people to think about is, while you're sitting in this space, I think sometimes it's hard because you don't really know what your end goal is. Yeah. And you're like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And I think maybe those blank space moments can be more helpful or more easier if you understand, or if one understands that you're there so you can feel safe in your body and you can feel safe with your thoughts. And some thoughts or ideas might be not fun, but the whole point is to find safety in your own self. So your body and your thoughts are a place of sanctuary and a place where you can call home. And I think a lot of people, including myself, put safety in other things. I don't want to be in my head, so I'm going to go on YouTube or go wherever. And that's a safe space,
Right. We numb ourselves and we occlude the things that we're most afraid of confronting, sometimes just ourselves. So, I was going to suggest, there's so much wisdom in what you're saying. And I would suggest that maybe your first blank space date is actually that, like trying to sit and understand, what is it behind this that makes me so twitchy, makes me avoid this? What am I avoiding? What's making me so uncomfortable? Just that examination in a blank space date would be incredibly helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think that, in the past, I did this a lot too, but I think, and I hear this a lot of people as well, you just don't know what you're doing there. You're just sitting there like, there's a leaf, this is bored. But I think if you have a sort of internal goal, that is really helpful when because you have, these bow and arrows, but you don't really have a target.
Yes.
And I think having a target gives you speed, it gives you momentum, and you need that even in moments of silence.
Absolutely.
I think. So let's see. From an organizational development standpoint, how do these systems unintentionally reward leadership behavior that actually causes harm? Because I think that's another thing that people don't talk about, where it's a cycle and a loop of causing harm. So how do systems sort of reward that unintentionally?
Well, let me count the ways. We've already talked about firefighting and rewarding firefighters versus fire preventers.
Right.
There's also rewarding doing. We equate productivity with activity.
Yeah.
So we're looking at the light, not the heat that it's generating. Mm-hmm. What's the impact of this? We take busyness as a badge of honor, and we go, oh, they're not so busy. They must be out to pasture now. So there's so many things that are all about this, what I call in one of the chapters in You Are the Boss, that foster this superhero syndrome. Like, I can do it all. And who's going to make myself vulnerable by saying, I don't know the answer, or I cannot do it, or I need to prioritize, or I need you to give me some priorities. So the systems all conspire to squeeze the most out of us. But the most that they're squeezing out is not necessarily the best juice that they're getting.
Yeah.
Because we're tired, we're not focusing on the right things, we're fiddling around with the minutia as opposed to having impact with fewer things.
Yeah. That makes sense. Do you have any, I haven't read the entire book, but what do you think is the most useful tool done by employees with each other, not just with a leader, that can help even out a hierarchical system?
One of the tools is called mapping, and that is basically a user guide of you. So it's really helpful across the power divide. You know, if a manager says, look, frowning is my thinking face. I'm not upset at you when I'm frowning. You've given me something great to think about, and I'm frowning and looking off into the distance because I'm thinking about what you said. But I find that teams that do that become more closely knit and more efficient and effective. They're not spawning off those multiple meanings that are not productive. Oh, my peer is out to get me. No, when they ask a question this way, it's because of this thing. So this mapping tool is mapping for other people the coordinates of you. And you can do that based on some body language quirks or specifics that you show, time of day, like, hey, if I didn't greet you in the morning, it's because I'm not a morning person, rather than I hate you. And or like communication preferences, short text. Somebody told me they had a reading challenge, and so when people sent them long emails, they took them forever to respond, and people thought, oh, this person's so irresponsive. No, it just takes them hours to process a page-long email.
Yeah.
Send them short texts, send them short IMs instead, or vice versa.
Right.
So creating a map with each other will help you get your jobs much better done. It'll lubricate the wheels of collaboration. So you have less dependence actually with the person in position of power above you.
Yeah. I love that. It's kind of like with your friends, you know what all diets and allergies are.
Right.
You know, you're like, this person is gluten-free, this person is vegan. So when you're making a huge meal for everyone, you do it accordingly. So carrying on that into your workplace, why not? You know, see it as one big feast of intellect, I guess. What gives you the most hope about the future of leadership in 2026? It's now February 4th, 2026. It's almost the beginning of the new year. And there seems to be new chapters of leadership coming in, younger people coming in. So what gives you hope about the future of leadership, and what still worries you?
Well, I think it's the what gives me hope is it's not just new people, but also technology. And AI, of course, is on top of mind for everybody. And we're going to be managing human beings and agents, AI agents, or maybe AI agents are going to manage us. I don't know. But what gives me real hope in that is the humanity of human beings. That when we connect human to human, we increase productivity, we increase engagement, we increase joy that we feel and they feel in the work that they do. So that's what gives me hope, is to continue to tap into what's human about us and connect across that.
Yeah, I love that. I think about humanity in that regard too. And that also gives me hope, knowing that people will always have an innate bent or bend towards humanity. No matter how much AI or computers are thrown at us. Even I think kids who are born in a time when all they know is our screens, I see a swerve into these generations using flip phones instead, and having this innate desire to be human, you know?
Yes.
We are, for lack of a better term, wired that way. And I think that gives me hope is that there's this je ne sais quoi about humanity, that no matter how many screens are around us, we are going to want to be as human as possible.
Humans first. Yeah. Yeah.
If there's one question every leader should regularly ask themselves to stay grounded, what is it?
Wow, great question. Every action that you take in a position of authority has a reaction. Do I know the reaction my action is causing? It takes us full circle back to intent and impact.
I love that. I think also thinking about your job and company as a domino effect. Or the what's that one theory? It's the butterfly mandala.
Yeah, the chaos theory. Yes.
Yeah. And thinking about just the delicacy of something as simple as a butterfly wing flap and how that can cause just a domino effect, And I think it's important, as you were talking about earlier, we should be very aware of Joe and Megan, who are not morning people, so will come in a little grumpy. We should make space for that, but we should also make space and take accountability for how we enter into these spaces.
Absolutely.
And I think a key word is just balance. Like Tuesdays and Wednesdays are going to be rough, but Wednesdays and Thursdays, I will show up with a happy face on. I feel like, let's meet halfway here.
Yes. Yes.
And I think that's really important, working as a team with your own negligences,
For sure.
So we're closing up here. And one last question I like to ask to all of our guests is, what do you personally do to stay grounded in the meaningful and sometimes heavy work that you do?
Great question. I go for runs. And it's another form of blank space, but I'm also getting some exercise in the process. And I try to go outdoors whenever possible. It almost always resets my mood. I know we have research on the chemicals that get activated in our bodies, but also it fills me with gratitude. It fills me with gratitude that I get to do this work. Mm-hmm. As somebody very wise said, you don't have to do this, you get to do this. That I get to do this work. It's such a privilege. That I get to live in a place where I can run safely outside. That I have a body that still allows me to do that. That I'm surrounded by beautiful scenery when I do it. I go for runs.
Wow. I love that. I think that gratitude is one of the most important currencies that we can have in our humanity.
Yes.
Is having gratitude for everything. I think we take something as simple as our health for granted. And I'm sure there's clinical studies. I know there's been clinical studies about the health and gratitude. So I think that's a really important reminder. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Sabina, thank you so much for being on the CivilTalk podcast. We really appreciate you and your wisdoms and your amazing book and all of the work you've done with leaders in the workplace. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Tapasya.
Yeah. And if there's anything you want to tell our listeners, where they can find you and all your work, let us know where we can find you.
The best place would be my website, sabinanawaz.com. Okay. And if you buy a copy of the book, which you can also order from the book section of the website, there are a number of tools that are referenced in the book that you can download for free. Oh, okay. So you can immediately put them into action.
Oh, I love that. Okay. I will do that today, actually. Awesome. Send to my boss. Nicely. No, I'm kidding. All right. Thank you so much for being here. All this information and what Sabina just mentioned, we will also put on civiltalk.com, including her book, You're the Boss. So head over there. If this conversation resonated with you or anyone else, share it with anyone you think can benefit. And as always, thank you for being part of the CivilTalk community.